Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 308 of the J Situation Podcast. I'm recording this on June 2nd, 2026. How are all you wonderful folks doing? I'm doing pretty well. Taught a course today on explosion hazards, bigger hazards than typical with small arms. But, a lot of things we examine and educate folks about have relevance to silencers and small arms. And that's one of the reasons I like doing this podcast so much. It's to help educate you folks on hazards, ensure you can enjoy your really cool suppressed weapon systems, enjoy them safely, get the most out of them. That's kind of my goal here. So today we're going to hit the technical deep dive on the Rampart Range Carson 556 silencer. This is the infinity core derivative that we tested on the Mark 18, and that report was published last week. So if you would like to know how this pretty high performing dedicated 556 silencer does on an SBR, you have come to the right place. Unrelated to today's discussion is the photograph posted with this episode, per typical. The picture is just one I took when I was out practicing pistol shooting. Recently, I've been practicing very regularly, and I made it a point to do that, and I really enjoy it. So I took a photo of my carry gun there to share because it's awesome. And the silencer I personally use for that setup is also in the photograph there. That's it. That's the photo. Maybe stay tuned and you will see some data and analysis on that silencer. Spoiler alert. But yeah, no, we definitely want to bring that to you for the love of the game. Those of you who know that is an original AAC Tyrant 45. Might be one of the best 45 caliber pistol silencers of all time. It might be one of them. You be the judge. Let's get on with the show. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you're new to the podcast, boy, so glad to have you. And there are timestamps in the episode description wherever you are listening. It doesn't matter where you're listening. Could be our website, could be Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. Anywhere you're listening, there's an episode description and there are timestamps, okay? You can skip to wherever you would like. If you want to hang around with me a little bit longer, I'm going to just tell you about some companies that make this podcast possible every week and have done so for quite some time. And, they're cool. The first one is Legion Athletics. Nothing you do, exercise, sports, anything is worth doing without consistency. You have to do things all the time if you want to excel at them and dominate. Legion Athletics can help you with that. Whey protein, pre-workout, post-workout, vitamins, minerals, creatine. They don't have everything you need, but they certainly have a lot of it. They are, and this is just my words, I think they're really good partners in drug-free strength sport. Like if you're competing in athletics and you are subject to drug testing, Legion is a pretty good place to shop because whatever you get from them is not going to make you fail a drug test, which is very important to many people, including myself. Use the code word PewScience. You will buy one, get one 50% off your entire shopping cart on your for a first order, and you'll get 20% cash back every time you use that code going forward. Code word PewScience. LegionAthletics.com. There's always a link in the show notes for that. Get strong. It's important. This podcast is also brought to you by the fine folks at Silencer Shop. They're a very large distributor of silencers, and they have an electronic system. It is a kiosk. It is all over the country, and it contains your biometric data and paperwork stuff to make sure that there aren't a lot of errors during the process, and it simplifies everything. It is silencer ownership simplified. Did you know that Top Gun Range in Houston is one of our sponsors? And did you know they are actually one of the folks that, loans us a lot of silencers for testing? They're cool. And they have a 15-lane indoor shooting range, which is amazing. They have comfortable couches, which are cool. They have a really great staff. Did you know that they have a PewScience AI that helps their staff educate people about silencers? His name is Marvin. And when the machines take over, he will remember you, that you listen to this podcast and that you follow PewScience and read the articles, and you will be spared in the coming war with the machines. Top Gun Range. Go check them out. Capital Armory also sponsors this podcast, and they're pretty cool. they actually distribute things directly to your door if you live in one of the 42 states where silencers are legal, which is really cool. Also, they are a long-standing business in the NFA space in Texas. They truly are enthusiasts. Like, the owner of the company is actually an enthusiast, which is cool. For better or worse, they're doing it for the love of the game at the end of the day, which you love to see it. All right. So go check them out too. This podcast is also brought to you by the Pew Science Laboratory. I'm the technical director of the lab, and sometimes my voice goes because I speak all day and then come do this podcast. No, we've chosen to do this podcast for past 6 years or so or more. And our goal is to push the silencer industry forward one test at a time. And it's working really well, I think. And you can visit our website at pewscience.com for the suppression rating, the simplest and most accurate hearing safe rating for suppressed small arms. True human inner ear response of the entire gunshot from before combustion takes place till all the combustion is gone. It's the best, dude. 8 sections, the silencer sound standard, the most in-depth and accurate silencer data and analysis in the entire known universe, 24/7 for the public. pewscience.com, grassroots, because you can support this podcast. You can support Pew Science. You can support all the public testing we do by joining with a membership at pewscience.com. That would help us continue. It's true. And if you can't give a monthly thing, it's really cheap. But if you can't, I understand. Like, donate every once in a while. And if you can't do that, that's okay too. You don't pay anything. Just spread the word. Let folks know that silencers and guns are awesome. Let them know that they can learn about true silencer physics at pewscience.com. They can listen to this podcast. And if you have a silencer question, we're here for you. All right? That's all about that. So what we're going to do is we have one topic. All right? This is going to be the Rampart Range Carson 5.56. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start that at a time of 7 minutes and 5 seconds. All right. So I'm going to break this down into the intro and recap. Then we're going to talk about the general overview of the silencer, like we typically do in these deep dives. Then I'm going to get a little more technical into the actual silencer design of the internals. And that's going to be subtopic Charlie. Then we're going to move into the hazard map brief. That's, I believe it's brief 8.1.23. Yeah, that's correct. That's going to be a very simple spatial overview of the suppressed hazards from this system. And then we're going to go through a detailed look at the system performance and the blast physics in the main report. And then I'll give you overall thoughts, okay? So we'll move into this intro now, the subtopic alpha at a time of 7 minutes and 53 seconds. And I'll be back in just a second. Man, my voice was doing so well before I started this thing. And then it all just fell off a cliff. You talk all day and you feel like you could do it longer, and then just dies on you. No, okay. So this Carson 5.56. This was Sound Signature Review 6226. Carson 5.56 on the 10.3 inch 5.56 Mark 18. This welcomed Rampart Range Suppression back into the mix. You saw the original the Carson 30 on the SR25. A few months back. This is their dedicated 5.56 model, the Carson 5.56. The Carson 30 killed it on the SR25, did absolutely amazing. And a lot of people were wondering, well, how does it do on 5.56? Well, we'll do you one better. We'll give you the answer for what it's meant to do, the Carson 5.56 on 5.56. Because if there's one thing you'll learn about Rampart Range Suppression, if you haven't already, is they are pretty intent on specialization. And that, I think every brand has an answer for that. Some folks like specialization. Some folks like more universal products. It just takes all kinds. You don't know what people are going to want. But in this case, I think you'll notice this is the second time we've reported on a Rampart Range silencer to you. And again, just like the Carson 30, the Carson 5.56 is a specialized unit. It's pretty cool. And this is an infinity core derivative. And so, when you're examining this and when you read through the report, you're getting insights into something in technology that has been explored a lot by the lab. And the really cool thing about this that Rampart Range Suppression did is that they did this legally. Rampart Range licensed the Infinity tech from Otter Creek Labs and modified it. They did it on the up and up, guys. They did it legally and in a morally sound way. The reason I'm bringing that up today is because I was recently made aware of some silencers that have this happens a lot, but I've seen this before where silencers completely steal technology from other companies. I saw a cutaway today that boy, it shocked me how similar it was to mature and developed technology from some companies that I know for certain have not licensed their patent to these people. And I saw, I'm speaking about some other parties, and I saw that, I'm not going to name names because it's, not doing that, but I'm just telling you, like, we see that stuff and a lot of people in the industry see it. And, people work really hard to design and engineer products. And when people steal, man, it just doesn't seem right, And I mean, it's certainly illegal, but it's also like, forget about the law for a second. Just think about like as a person, like as a man, stealing someone's tech and like, it just, I lose a lot of respect for people if I had any at all, in those situations. It's gross to me. It's abhorrent. So I found that gross, and I don't want to soil this great discussion with that, but I wanted to give an attaboy to Rampart Range Suppression because they're doing it right. And there's tons of other people doing it right too. There's tons of great companies in this industry doing it right, doing it on the up and up, and I think being honest American business owners. And I find that to be a symbol of capitalism and innovation, and frankly, part of the American dream. But when I see people ripping things off, you're no better than communist China. Frankly, you're no better than communist China if you're doing this in the United States and ripping off American manufacturing and designers. So for shame, some of you out there, just if you see one of these people, just kick them in the nuts. All right, let's get positive. So this is the second, I'm just kidding, kind of, not really. I'm not kidding at all. This is the second Carson report we published for Rampart Range Suppression. It's a really interesting silencer because, it's taking a tech from Otter Creek Labs that was really, purposely versatile, and then adopting it into a more specialized application, in a way that they wanted to do. They wanted to make it their own because they had a specific use case for it. And I think that's something that we're gonna go into today too. Why you would pick a specialization versus a broad application for a product or silencer. And, because the silencer market is a funny thing. Sometimes you have one size fits all silencers, and sometimes you have something like the Infinity, which is meant to be dual hard use silencer for centerfire rifle use. But there are traits the Infinity has that make it well suited to do things that are, maybe not for suppressive fire applications, go to war stuff. The Infinity can do some things that you would want the traits in another application. Not heavy use machine gun. You would want it to do the same things it's doing in another way. And if you utilize that technology in a different envelope, you could really fit it into a role that some folks might find more practical for their use case. And that's the Carson series. And, you folks saw the 7.62 NATO evaluation of the Carson 30, which, again, it's somewhat similar to Infinity with a solid 7.62 end cap, if you want to think of it that way, but in titanium, like the Carson series is. And it did very well in the SR25. And from our own testing, I can tell you that it does outperform an Infinity on that host by a little bit. Now, you saw the 5.56 NATO evaluation of the Carson 5.56, which is the subject of today's talk, and you saw that silencer is also somewhat similar to an Infinity, this time with an Infinity solid 5.56 end cap, it would be similar to that. Again, in titanium though. And then here again, you see the Carson outperforms the Infinity a little bit. Now, no, again, not by a huge margin in suppression ratings like throughout the risk field, but by a little bit and with better FRP control, right? With better first round pop control. So that was interesting. And so basically, the same tweaks that Rampart Range made to the Infinity core with their modeling and testing and what they fleshed out to create the Carson 762, they had used the same process to flesh out and modify the Carson 5.56, and it seems like their methods are paying dividends, and they worked. I mean, that's based on our testing, okay? And I mean, obviously on their impressions of their own product, but also on our testing that we did. We see that the methods looks like they worked. You end up with a silencer that's half the weight of Infinity. You don't lose performance, and you actually gain a little bit of performance. We'll go through this technically, of course, and we're going to talk about what makes it tick, and you can decide if it's something that interests you, or maybe you're just happy burning down an Inconel Infinity with a belt fed or an FRT all day, which of course is just fine. So it makes this country great. You can do whatever you want. I don't care how you burn your money, bro. I don't care what you buy, and I certainly don't care about how much ammo you use as long as you're shooting. So let's move into subtopic B, the general overview of the silencer at a time of 16 minutes and 34 seconds. Okay, 1 second. Okay, dedicated 5.56 silencer. Please do not try to put 6mm through this, okay? If you want to do that, you can actually go talk to Rampart Range, and they will make you a 6mm silencer. They offer things like that. This silencer is roughly 6.5 inches long, or 6.6 inches long with no mount installed. That means no rear hub coupler or anything is a hub silencer. So you take everything, all the mount out and everything, it's going to be roughly 6.5 inches long. You can keep it that long forever and mount it on your gun if you want to use like a recessed direct thread mount or something. The direct thread mount that we used to test it is just a standard one we have, and that took the system length to 7 inches flat, okay, from barrel shoulder to end of silencer. The diameter of the silencer is 1.71 inches long, a little bit bigger than some classic 5.56 silencers, but not huge. So not crazy or anything. It's not like a Putnik, you know what I mean? Putnik's a cool silencer, but it's also like 2 inches in diameter. This is 1.71, so a little bit less than the 1 3/4 that Q made popular back in the day. Not back in the day, but like a few years ago. This silencer is 3D printed, and here's a big thing to know. With no mount installed, 9.7 ounces, because it's printed out of titanium. That's a really big weight savings over a lot of the new 5.56 cans coming to market. Everyone's like doing Inconel and stuff and 3D printing. Rampart Range is like, we'll go titanium. And I tell you what, if you're a shooter who doesn't need constant heavy machine gun durability, I mean, there's something to be said about titanium, especially with a modified Infinity core. And I'll get to that in the next subtopic, some technical details about why that is. I myself use heavy silencers for certain things, like physically heavy silencers, but I also use light silencers. It just depends what I'm doing. And with the direct thread mount we used, the weight increased to almost 11 ounces total, so you're still half the weight of Infinity all in. So that's a good peg point for you. The exterior of the Carson 5.56 is very classic, and that is just smooth, plain finished. The one we tested is black, but I do believe there are other coating color options. If you contact Rampart, I'm sure they'll paint it any color you want. The big difference that you're going to notice from an Infinity right away, besides the weight when you pick it up, is and there's no texture on this on the outside. The Carson series doesn't have removable end caps, okay, and removable and changeable end caps like the Infinity. There is no end cap or flow modularity in the Carson series. Again, Rampart Range chose the path of specialization and what they wanted the silencer to do. And it is up to you, the user, to use it as is, or, mess with your host weapon to figure it out. So in doing that, they did increase the performance a little bit, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, okay? So that's really just the general overview. Let's get a little more technical now at a time of 20 minutes and 5 seconds. Okay, 1 second. So silencer design. Now, this is where it really gets interesting, right? So when you enter the rear of the silencer, or the proximal end, where it mounts to your weapon, where the blast enters, you see a really familiar sight. Good old infinity core, blast chamber, and first reflector. Okay. And at first, you might think the Carson is identical to the infinity in this region. But you gotta look a little bit closer, because the devil's in the details here. One of the things that makes this core design perform well is its high early time flow rate, right? As you all know, that you have kept up with this research. Another word for that is the speed at which the blast load that enters the first expansion chamber clears and vents off of the first reflector downstream into the primary bore and into the annulus. In the Carson, Rampart modified the infinity design by enlarging the 4 90-degree vents on the sidewalls of the chamber. So you will see that when you look inside. If you take an infinity and a Carson side by side, you will see that the porting on the Carson is a little bit larger. You can use a flashlight if you see it, but it'd be easier for you to see with a flashlight probably. What this does is it lets blast loads be directed into the annulus more easily, and there are some performance differences that result just from that one change. The early time flow rate's a little bit higher. The first round pop is changed. The proportion of ignition changes in timing. That's why that is. There is a downstream change that works in concert with the upstream change. And so the second change to the core is that the final expansion chamber and the annular interface is different than with an infinity. So you're venting directly to the final expansion chamber from the annulus and the Carson, and the infinity is adapted for multiple end caps, so the venting is modified there. So again, this is a specialized difference in the Carson series. They don't have multiple end cap flexibility, and by design, like on purpose, they don't have the multiple end cap flexibility, so they can simply do what they want and keep it constant, the same all the time. Okay, and so this Carson 556 does what it does on 556 the way it does, because they wanted it to. There's no changeability possible downstream. Now, it's not a big performance shift. When you think about the infinity versus this, it's not a big performance shift. It's not like if you have an infinity, you should just go and just upgrade to a Carson because you think you're going to have some kind of meaningful, huge performance change that warrants a changing of your systems. Like, don't go spend $1,000, on something like that, thinking it's going to be, night and day. I just don't think that's the case here. But I do think if you're in the market for a silencer that does what this one does, and you don't want it to be heavy, I think that's where the Carson shines. It's not like they took the infinity core and made it worse, for example, right? It's not like a ripoff. It's not like I talked about earlier, like people stealing tech in the silencer industry. It's not like this is a bootleg infinity that is kind of good, but like you can tell sucks. It's not like that. This is an enhanced infinity on the up and up, and it's at least as good, if not better, in every performance metric with regard to signature reduction than infinity. So that and again, it's done on the up and up, purposefully and transparently, which is cool. Now, you have a compromise to think about with the material, right? And we're going to talk about this. And this may or may not be a compromise depending on your point of view and depending on your individual use case needs, right? You have a titanium silencer. Okay. So one thing you'll need to realize is that you will have some sparking at night, most likely, like eventually, like with this silencer, like probably especially on short barrel weapons. Now, have I done that myself with the silencer at night to see? No, I haven't, but I can surmise that eventually you might have some sparking. If it doesn't happen, cool, I'm wrong. But I'm just erring on the side of conservatism to tell you might. Okay, because, not all titanium silencers will spark, but some can. Does it matter to you? Well, it may or may not matter to you. Sparking at night is usually frowned upon by people that have two arguments, and these aren't necessarily bad arguments. They can be good arguments, but let me tell you both arguments, and you are going to have to decide whether or not they matter to you in reality. Okay, I'm going to present the arguments that people give, and then you can decide whether they matter to you personally. Okay, I think that's the best thing to do. Instead of don't go to the internet asking if other people think something's important. You should just get the facts, and then you decide what's important. That's the whole point of Pew Science. We don't tell you what silencer to buy. We tell you how they perform. We don't care which one you buy. We just want you to know how they perform. Just giving you facts. So the first argument against sparking of silencers, for example, is that it's going to reveal your position to an adversary somehow, right? That might be true. If maybe if your adversary is scanning your location for some type of visual signature at night, something you're trying to remain undetected. Okay, fair. That could be real. Might happen. Again, we haven't tested its nighttime signature, but as a titanium silencer without PIP or something, it could maybe spark. For example, the PTR silencers, the PIP, they don't spark. I don't think. They're titanium, so not all titanium silencers spark all the time. I'm just saying this could spark maybe, and then maybe the guy or girl trying to find you might find you. That could be true. Now, does it matter to you? I mean, there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast, and some of you certainly care about that. But the likely answer for the vast majority of you is that doesn't matter at all. Because you're shooting a pig or something, and that pig's not going to shoot back. And if it does, boy, do we have problems. You know what I mean? So the second argument that people make about titanium silencer sparking and it being bad is, maybe you're using night vision, and they say it can obscure your view. Maybe bloom, auto-gate your tubes or something. That could be true, I guess. I mean, and maybe there's significant firing strings going on. You start generating a sparkler, you're flashing and crazy stuff. But I don't know, man. I can tell you from personal experience using both night vision and thermal simultaneously, on a helmet, on my face, shooting titanium silencer, short barrel rifles with 7.62 NATO and 5.56 NATO. It really doesn't mess with my vision that much personally. I mean, maybe I'm just not that sensitive to it. Maybe my equipment doesn't care as much as yours. This is something that's really niche. It's pretty specialized. I think if this matters to you, you might know it, and you already know what you want and what you need. If you don't know if this matters to you at all, it probably doesn't matter to you at all. I think that's how specialized that supposed problem is. Okay, 1 second. But I mean, and I'm not trying to sell you on this thing. I'm not trying to say, oh no, you just get all your silencers should be titanium. No, absolutely not. I own titanium silencers. I also own Inconel silencers. Just different tools in the toolbox for different problems to solve. Now, the two, most popular internet arguments that I just gave you, those are the titanium sparking arguments, right? The other thing about titanium is that it does lose strength when subjected to elevated temperatures for long periods of time, more so than some other alloys, and that can result in a couple things happening, right? The first thing could be accelerated erosion of the silencer, okay? The second thing could be that you eventually fail the silencer. Now, if you're in the market for the Carson, the second thing's not a thing, because if you want to continuously do mag dumps all day, that's what silencers like the Infinity are for. And that's why silencers like the Infinity weigh twice as much as the Carson. Okay? So that's probably not an issue. So let's talk about the first thing, the erosion, because that's a more real threat. It's not as existential, right? That's a more grounded in reality, and that's something that you've seen pictures of online all the time, and maybe your buddies have talked about. So that could be real. So let's talk about it. So erosion, it's a really interesting thing. And when you see it in a silencer, it's going to manifest in two primary places typically. The first is most often the blast baffle mouth, And the second place will be the baffle mouth of the second baffle, typically, or the second orifice. It just really depends on the type of silencer. I'm being very general, but I'm telling you some common things, because you can erode both the first couple of baffles in a rifle silencer. And regardless of material, this is caused by hot plasma jet from the barrel muzzle and coming out there into the silencer. It impinges upon the leading edges of the first and second reflectors, and you're superheating the material under high pressure. And what it's doing is locally weakening the material, and you start to physically move particles off of the surface. Part of the sparking you see when the titanium silencer is when you move the particles off the surface, they're burning in free air. It's actually you're burning titanium particles. That's why it's sparking like that. It can happen with not only titanium, but other metals. If you have any metal residue in your silencer, and it can burn in free air if the surface area of the particle is conducive to that. There's a whole science of this. It's really cool. If you keep geometry constant and all other things equal, titanium would incur this behavior of erosion before something like Inconel nickel alloy would, for example. All other things equal, same ammo, same gun, same firing schedule, same barrel length, same silencer, just one made out of titanium, one made out of Inconel, that titanium would erode first. All other things equal, okay? Now that I've said all other things equal 3 times, now let's look at those variables a little bit closer, okay? Now let's change things up. What would happen instead if you kept material constant? So like you had 2 silencers, both made out of titanium this time, both titanium. And one had a blast baffle shaped like the one in the Carson and the Infinity, and the other had one shaped like, I don't know, like an old dead air Sam NS. And let's say they were all titanium. And I know the old Sam NS is not titanium, but just for the sake of argument, just humor me. Let's say they were both titanium. Okay. Which one would erode first with the same muzzle device and the same gun with the same ammo with the same firing schedule with the same barrel length? Well, the dead air one would erode first. Why? It's due to the geometry of the first reflector. The Infinity has an almost flat mouth face. The sharp leading edges aren't in the plasma stream at the same angle they would be if you had a traditional baffle mouth. The angle of incidence is different, okay? So long story short, you probably will not destroy a titanium Infinity core as fast as some other cores would be destroyed if you're comparing titanium to titanium, okay? This is just, and I've actually spoken about this many times on the podcast in many different contexts. Yeah, contexts. But this time it's particularly relevant, of course. Very relevant. So if you're keeping your barrel length normal, what's normal? I don't know, dude. Like normal length, not like, oh, what? I'd like to shoot a 5.5-inch barrel AR. It's America. It's like, well, no, I know it's America, but your ballistics are terrible. If you're keeping your barrel length normal and your firing schedule normal, just typical, like you're not G.I. Joe, you're not trying to be Delta Force G.I. Joe, maybe titanium Carson works fine for you. I don't know. It's up to you. I hope it helps. You know, you can talk to the manufacturer about what they do. I mean, they're military. You know, Rampart Range is run by military dudes that shot things in the military. So you talk to them, you have some real world experience. And yeah, are they trying to sell you a product? Absolutely. Are they going to shoot you straight? Yeah, probably. They got nothing to lose. I mean, it is what it is. Then you have a Pew Science report on the freaking silencer. You know how it performs. You know it's titanium. They're not going to hide anything. So just talk to them. They probably shot more rounds to these silencers than anyone else. They made them. You know what I mean? So yeah. So now let's look at the hazards that this thing would protect you against and what the reduced hazards end up looking like in color on a map at a time of 34 minutes and 28 seconds. All right, 1 second. Okay. Yeah, subtopic Delta, Hazard Map Brief 8.1.23. You can pull that up on our website in Section 8 of the Silencer Sound Standard. There's also a link to it in report 6226 of the silencer. So you can't miss it, guys. And you know what? And if you don't have the website handy, this would be our last week's social media post. It would have this map as part of that. So the map's everywhere, dude. You can't miss it. You probably Google it and find it now. So, you go to the report and you can click on the map to make it. You can read this hazard map brief because it's really short because it's a brief, or you can click on the map to make it bigger and just kind of look at the colors as I talk. And so when you look at this, it's kind of refreshing to me. You're looking at a map for a suppressed Mark 18 system, and you're seeing some pretty interesting stuff. A lot of yellow on this map, and you start to see some light green develop. Way back behind the shooter, and way back, or way forward in the far field there. As you start to get more far field from the origin of the hazards, and that's huge. It's a recipe for people around you not being too pissed off. If they're walking around, maybe they have to take their hearing protection off or something. That's good to know. And hey, could be good for you too as the operator if you're shooting around obstacles. It could be good that your hazard is dissipating a lot. That's certainly a plus. It could be good. Maybe you're perched up on a rock face, raining down some well-placed lead pills on maybe something, between the canyon walls there. You're looking at something that could be good. It might be the ticket. In other words, the risk field is much more forgiving than it is with some other silencers on this weapon system. I think that's a good takeaway from looking at this map at a high level. And you can look at that visually, and you can flip through the hazard maps that we have on the website to kind of see. Compare this to the Lazarus 6 of the week before. Excellent silencer, but do the hazard maps look different? Oh, absolutely. Would you have the same experience shooting both silencers in the situations I just described? Absolutely not. You would not. You would not have the same experience. You know what I mean? And when you look at the risk forward of the muzzle, forward of the end cap of the silencer, note how it's a little more focused than you've seen with some other silencers, like, more focused with the Lazarus that you saw last time, right? Before that, way more focused than the Lazarus. This is because this has a solid, dedicated bore 5.56 end cap. The core of the Carson is very efficient, focusing the blast more. The blast momentum is not escaping at such a high rate, so the jet does not spread out as broadly. It does not elevate the risk field as broadly. The jet is more focused. The resulting hazard field is therefore more focused. I was explaining this to a gentleman, social media chat the other day. And in fact, what he was asking about was the jet stability index. And the jet stability index in PewSoft HD is a computational parameter derived from partially from the Omega metric. So it is based on real test data, just like the entire map is. It's just it's used in the model to shape the spread of the forward jet there. Okay, very good. Again, just a model, read 8.1.1 on our website to learn more about all that. It goes into detail. Another thing to look for on this map is the operator hazard field, the area around the silhouette shooter man there in the picture. Sure, the shooter's ear suppression rating shown on the map is in the low 20s. What, 23.8? Yeah, okay, so not quite mid 20s, low 20s. But again, as you know, this is an untuned weapon, and it can definitely get higher at the shooter's ear with tuning, particularly with such a fantastic muzzle suppression rating. The high early time flare rate is still helping you out a lot here. But remember, guys, the end cap is not venting other than the primary bore orifice. So you are slightly, ever so slightly safer than with an Infinity with a solid 5.56 end cap, but not by much. It's very similar to that. It's almost the same on average, in fact. That's reflected in the suppression rating metrics. Okay. Now, the interesting thing here, and you see this in the report when we discuss later, is that the FRP suppression performance is a bit better with the Carson than it is with the Infinity. We can look at that now, actually. Let's do that. Let's move into the system performance at a time of 39 minutes. and 44 seconds. Okay, making excellent time today. This is good for everybody. Okay, one moment. Okay, so I'm going to close the hazard map brief, and I'm going to go to the full report. Report 6.226. Remember, if you are a Pew Science member, you can pull up the full member version. There's no ads in it, and also you have all the data and analysis, and you can follow along perfectly with me. If you are not a member, that's completely okay. You can always pull up the free version on the website, and you can follow along just fine too. So starting at the top of the report, bottom line up front, 42.4 suppression rating, 1 meter left of the end cap, 1.6 meters above the ground in the true free field. 23.8, 6 inches right of the shooter's right ear, also in the free field, for a total composite suppression rating of 42.5 on the standard untuned 10.3 inch barrel Mark 18 AR-15 rifle with 070 gas port, buttstock position 4 of 6, M193 Lake City ball ammunition, and H2 buffer with a standard carbine buffer spring. That's a mouthful, right? But it's true, because that's how you get this answer. If you change one of those things, the answer changes. That's right. Standard. But Pew Science doesn't, they don't show the methods, and yeah. Standard. That's why it's reliable. No, it's cool though. You look at these metrics. You look at these metrics, and you get a couple points higher than I pulled up the rankings in a separate tab here. I was looking at this the other day, or a second ago here. You pull up the rankings. I went to the Pew Science rankings, pewscience.com/rankings. If you're free, if you're not a member, and pewscience.com/rankings-members. If you're a member, and in the silencer drop down there, I selected all 3 configurations of the Infinity that were tested on the Mark 18, and I selected the Carson 5.56 in the Mark 18. So I have the Mark 18 selected as a weapon, and then I have 4 silencers. So my table only shows 4 data points. I can easily see here that the Carson 5.56 in composite suppression rating is a couple points higher than the Infinity with the solid 5.56 end cap, and it's a couple points higher at the muzzle, which is what's driving that composite rating up. The ear rating is almost the same, less than a half a point differential. Okay, so let's look what's going on. One moment. So, if you go to the report and you scroll down past the hazard map, past the table, and you go to Figure 2. Here you have an interesting blast overpressure signature. Very interesting. The first thing you might notice right away, you have Figure 2A and Figure 2B. The first thing you might notice right away is that it's lower amplitude than with Infinity overall, and that's all well and good. But the strange thing, it might be strange to you, the strange thing you might see when you zoom into early time, and there in Figure 2B, is that the initial part of the signature looks a little different. So what are those little squiggles right before 30 milliseconds there? What is that? That didn't happen with the Infinity. What could that be? Well, this thing is titanium. Remember? When the blast load enters the silencer, you pick up some of that explosion before things exit the silencer. And what I think you're looking at there is internal combustion signature. You could call this ringing if you wanted to. It's not something. I sometimes I don't like to use that word because it has at least 3 meanings in both data acquisition and testing and human hearing. Like the term ringing, I don't like to use that word. That's why I don't use it in the report, because you could misconstrue it. There's other technical things that can happen that's a ringing. And this is just part of the fingerprint that you cannot hide. It's happening at a high frequency. How do I know that? Well, we're in the millisecond time regime, and that's an oscillation that's happening really quickly in fractions of a millisecond, so I can tell you it's a high-frequency event, but certainly higher amplitude than the steel silencer. It's very common to happen we believe, from blast chambers of titanium silencers. It's across all combustion regimes. It's not something you're going to hear, but it's part of the fingerprint you can't hide. You can't hear it in this case, this particular case. We can hear it in other cases. And this is just part of the fingerprint you can't hide. You have to remember, all silencers have fingerprints on certain weapon systems. It's impossible to hide the fingerprints. It's like you. You should have learned this as you're a kid. You ever meet those people, you look at their fingerprints, some people have like double loops or something. It's a very unique fingerprint. You could never, if they commit a crime, and their prints get collected. I mean, there's some features that are just so special that it's going to narrow them down so quickly. Silencers are the same way. Some of them, run of the mill signatures that you'll find them eventually. Some of them, you see something, you're like, oh my goodness, it's a trademark so and so. It's easy to see. You know what I mean? Another thing that the silencer does in early time that the Infinity didn't is it shoots some initial jetting out faster. Very interesting. And I think that's probably due to the faster clearing out of the blast chamber and that direct vent to annulus in the final chamber. So some jetting does get out faster, which is by design. But it's not all of it. There's some timing things that change. And that actually brings us to the second set of charts here in Figure 3 and 3B. So a big change you're going to see from the Infinity is the momentum behavior. So you check out the impulse in Figure 3. Here you're seeing great consistency, but you're seeing a bit of delayed accumulation. Okay, you're controlling the exit jets to a greater degree here. And this is very interesting given the higher early time flow rate. It's interesting. You have a higher early time flow rate, but you also have more control in late time? Very interesting. And one practical performance thing here, just to highlight, it's something that Rampart Range told us when we were speaking with them. They told us they noticed when they shoot a Carson 5.56 next to an Infinity or like an Infinity 5.56K, they seem to have a somewhat delayed gas stacking behavior with a Carson 5.56. I found that really interesting because that would indicate that the higher early time flow rate is doing its job and the increased momentum control you see in Figure 3 isn't negating it. And that's the wild part. What that means in reality is that they have not robbed Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. Like they have not compromised. They have accomplished two things at once with their core changes, which is cool. It's neat, I think. So it's basically optimized Infinity behavior with no downsides from a physics perspective from the behavior. I think that's cool. You know what I mean? It's really cool. Another practical performance thing here is the first round pop control I spoke about. He's like, yes, the Carson 5.56 does exhibit some noticeable FRP on the Mark 18, but it's doing better in this area than the Infinity. And you need to consider that the Infinity has some issues with FRP, like across different. But we saw the Infinity kind of not struggle hard, but struggle a little bit across. What was it? 300 blackout, 5.56, 7.62. It just the Infinity does struggle with FRP. It's kind of just a trait of the technology. And so for the changes that the Rampart made to the core to address that, it's an interesting outcome. I think it's a really interesting outcome. It is somewhat improved. And I think I spoke about this in like research note 3 of the report has that information. So you scroll down to the member section here with the shooter's ear waveforms, if it's available to you, if you're super cool. Just kidding. You're all super cool. You look at this and you see some very similar things to what an Infinity does to an operator. But if you look closer, the FRP severity is different. You still have lower back pressure features in the accumulations. Again, this is another indicator. It's all pieces of a puzzle. It's another thing showing that, yes, even the operator will have a different risk profile during the first shot, even though the shooter's ear suppression ratings are close, or really, really close. But it is showing it's all consistent. That's one thing that's really important for you to. I'm happy that we can show you how consistent this is, not only from test to test, but from muzzle to ear of the same test. Everything's copacetic. You can even do the math. If you wanted to QA QC this, if you wanted to peer review this yourself, You know where the sensors are. You know how long the gun is. You know how long the silencer is. You know how high above the ground it is. So you know where the reflections are happening. You know when things happen to the muzzle at the ear. You can do the math. You know the speed of sound in air. It's not going to be off that much. You can prove to yourself that all this is consistent, which is really cool. It's really good to see because it's consistent, it can allow you to make conclusions that end up being consistent across tests, which is valuable. All right. Yeah. So let's talk about big picture now. Let's talk about how this thing stacks up across the playing field. And I think you guys and girls, you noticed that this is a top 5 Mark 18 silencer right now in our rankings, which is not so, dude. All right, one second. Let me give you some overall thoughts in subtopic Foxtrot at a time of 50 minutes and 47 seconds. All right, very efficient today. So if you scroll down in this report and you get to, figure 6, the bar chart. I don't know if you folks noticed this, if you just glanced over it, but the bar chart in this report is in an order that you've never seen before for this many tests. We put it in order of tested length. Looks wild now, right? Yeah. So you look at this, you have to kind of scroll to see it. The Carson 5.56 is more toward the bottom. Because, hey, why? Well, 7 inches is tested with a direct thread mount. So it's right near, what is it near? The full-size Huxworks stuff. The 5.56 Ti and the 7.62 Ti, right? But what does it do performance-wise in the Mark 18? Regardless of its length. Well, at the mil standard measurement location, and this is in the report, I'm just going to, so you don't have to read it, I'll just tell you. At the mil standard measurement location, it performs similarly, on average, to a CAT-CAC-M, PTR Vent 3, Flow 5.56 Ti from Huxworks, an Infinity 7.62 with a 5.56 solid end cap, as you already know. Makes sense in pure, mil-spec muzzle suppression rating. Makes sense. Now, at the mil standard shooter's ear measurement location, buckle up for this. On average, it's in hazard reduction. It's on this weapon system. It's performing similarly, untuned Mark 18 to Lahar 30L, Polonium 30, Engaged Industries Operator 5.56, the Infinity with 5.56 solid end cap again, the Huxworks or OSS HXQD 5.56K, a Knights NT4. Well, those two lists are crazy different. Amazingly different lists. Why is that? Why are the two lists in this report and what I just told you so different? Well, it's because ejection port blast is very, very dangerous. And combining ejection port blast signature with muzzle signature is very, very complex. And shooter's ear suppression ratings on untuned hosts are incredibly difficult for people to understand. That has been clear to me. I thought we explained it enough on this podcast. It must just be because there's so many new people. I just think people are not paying attention. They're not reading. I don't know what it is. But you got to remember the suppression rating is a risk metric, guys. And that's why anecdotal reports vary so wildly. Untuned versus tuned weapons are going to give such different results that you need to be extremely careful with what you read online. You really do. The chances are, and this goes for even dealers doing this because I've seen it. The person giving an impression about 5.56 silencer performance on a AR is leaving out some really big important details most of the time. I cannot overemphasize how unreliable in general anecdotal reports are, even by supposedly well-known dealers. I am telling you guys, if anecdotal reports were reliable, we would not need to do this. Okay? Because again, guys, if you look at the first list, muzzle suppression rating, you're like, oh my gosh, wow, it's CAC-M, PTR Vent 3, Infinity, wow. And then you look at the second list, Polonium 30, Knight's NT4, I thought this was an advanced silencer. You see what I mean? It's because it's a different part of the risk field. The weapon's untuned, and there are hazards happening that you can't get away from unless you tune the weapon. So muzzle and ear matter, but only to the extent you understand why. You understand? Okay, so the reality here is that with this silencer, if you tuned your host, you would be at the top of the heap in totality. And that's not even up for debate based on this data, because we already know. We already know. In the Silencer Sound Standard, we have data to indicate that by tuning an AR, the top performing muzzle suppression silencers that have even a little bit of a high early time flow rate are going to dominate signature. Okay? So when you think about this, in like pragmatically, what is this silencer for? True field use. Packing your rifle, humping it to your destination, doing your work, getting out of there. It's not a suppressive fire, machine gun, or FRT type silencer. It's not for that, guys. So, is your weapon system going to be set up for this thing if you're using it? Is the gas port going to be all gaped out? Probably not. Chances are your system's going to be set up for optimal performance if you're in the market for a silencer like this, because that's what this silencer is for. I think this data analysis shows the silencer is probably very appropriate for a system like that. Okay, I mean, I hope you're getting my point here. When I talk about specialization, it's like, yeah, well, there's a reason. So all in all, this is probably a good option for folks that need to use it for its intended purpose. I would also go so far as to say a good option for people who don't want a super heavy silencer. Because you don't lose performance, but you gain ease of mobility. Okay, again, not trying to sell you on it. I'm just saying this is why it was created and this is what it does. It might not be for you. You might need a go to war crazy machine gun belt fed silencer, and those exist. But this is not that. This is for something else. And now you know how it performs, and you know how it performs in relation to a ton of other silencers. So you should be able to make a very informed decision based on this talk, based on the report, based on the hazard map of what is right or not right for you. Okay? So big thanks to Rampart Range Suppression for trusting us to perform this work. We will be back next week with something new and exciting. Hopefully I can get this done for you. It's going to be awesome. Just like a long time coming stuff. Should be fun. I'm getting pretty excited about it. Okay? So take care. Stay safe. And I will talk with you folks again soon. Okay, bye.